Hi, and welcome to Bible 365 with Kathy Carter. I'm Kathy Carter. 365 means we are taking 365 days to read through the Bible chronologically. So that means historically going from when sort of the world began all the way back, all the way through to the book of Revelation. And so I am using what's called the 1 Year Chronological Bible Reading Plan, and you can find that online at the 1 Year Chronological Bible online.com. It's a free download, so you can download it and use your own Bible that you have already, or they also sell Bibles in the NLT, the NIV, and the New King James Version. So if you wanted to do it that way, it's a little bit easier. If you are here today for the first time, we are more than 2 months in. So I am sort of near the end of the book of Numbers. And I would love if you went back at least to the book of Exodus. My best case scenario is you go all the way back to the book of Genesis. But if you're here and you just want to listen and see what's happening in the world of the Israelites, then that's fantastic. And then if it sort of piques your interest and it gets you excited to read the Bible, then I would recommend to go all the way back. In order to do that, you would definitely need to subscribe to my channel because it is definitely newer. And so there really isn't a lot of, it's not really cycled that much. So you would need to subscribe in order to see the videos popping up for you every day. I post a new video every single day. So there's a reading every day to go along with this video that's happening. I give a little bit of what I consider sort of commentary. I hate to say commentary because I want you to really think for yourselves. This is what I see when I read these verses, when I read these chapters in the Bible. This is what lights up to me, what God sort of opens up to me when I'm reading it. But I know that we are all individual and we are all slightly different. So while the truth is the truth, everybody who reads it may get, God may show a little something different to you that will really impact your life. So I always encourage to read it. And I strongly encourage you guys to read it. First is preferable, but just in general would be fantastic. So on that note, we are in the book of Numbers, and this is Numbers 32 through 33. And we are with the people of Israel. So we're with the Israelites, which have been saved out of Egypt. And Moses has brought them towards the promised land. This is really near the end of his life. So he knows at this point there are a couple of things that he needs to do. And then his life is going to be over because he is not going into the promised land with the rest of the people. So God has already assured him, because him and his brother, not that long ago, well, it could have been years ago, but him and his brother did not show God as being holy when they brought water out of the rock. And so because of that, because they didn't recognize him as holy, God has made it so that the two of them did not make it into the land of milk and honey, which is the land of Canaan, which eventually is the land of Israel. And so Moses is coming to the end, and we're really finding our way towards Canaan and towards sort of Joshua taking over the reins. But right now we're still with Moses and we're kind of finishing up with him. And so getting in some finishing touches here. And so in verse 1 in this chapter, so that's where we find ourselves. We find ourselves on the outside of Israel, sort of in the land of Moab and the land of the Midianites, and they've laid down territory here because they've won a lot of land because people came out against them and did battle with them, and the Israelites won. God was with Israel, and the Israelites won, and so they are camping here at the time. So in verse 1 of this section, so we're in chapter 32, the Reubenites and the Gadites, who had very large herds and flocks, saw that the land of Jazer and Gilead were suitable for livestock. So just to give you a heads up of who they are, the Reubenites and the Gadites are two tribes of Israel. They are, if you'll recall back in Genesis, Jacob had 12 sons, and these 12 sons each had a tribe. It's a little bit different because Joseph actually has two tribes, because he does not personally have a tribe, but his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, have a tribe, and Manasseh is going to be mentioned in here. And the Levites do not have a tribe. So that's what makes up your 12 tribes. It's the 10 tribes of Jacob and then 2 tribes of Joseph. And so we see Reuben and Gad are 2 of these tribes, and they want to stay in the area that they're in. So sort of in that area in which they've settled down. They've won this land and they've settled down, and they have herds and flocks. So they have animals And they say that this land is a really good land in order to raise and sell and produce these animals. And so they go to Moses and they ask Moses if they can live in this land. And so this land is actually outside of Israel. So this land is outside of the promise that God gave to the Israelite people. So that land was promised, right? God says this is the area, which again is the land of Israel, is what we now consider the state of Israel. And this land was promised to those people, and this outside land wasn't. They did win it, but it wasn't a promised land for those people. And so what we're going to say is those 12 tribes were guaranteed to get in the land of milk and honey, not to stay outside of that. So as you can probably assume, Moses is pretty mad. They weren't promised that land, and so they're saying, I don't want to go there, but I want to go over here, and we want to stay here. So Moses sees it in such a way that it looks like they're abandoning the Israelites. So there are these 12 tribes. There are these, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 601,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60. So obviously there are a lot of women and children and older people as well. But right now there are about 601,000 men. And so Moses is like, you guys want to leave them. And he's basically calling them wicked. And he's really upset with them. And he said, who do you think you are, not joining in with us when we go to take over the land, when we go to take over Canaan? And so I'm going to read verse 6. So he says, Moses says, I gave you a little bit of a summary, but Moses said to the Gadites and Reubenites, should your fellow Israelites go to war while you sit here? So first he's saying, should they do all the fighting and you guys just sit around and do nothing? And then his second thing is why do you discourage the Israelites from crossing over into the land the Lord has given them? This is one of these things that has been really sitting with me sorry, just shook that camera. One of the things that's really been sitting with me is the responsibility of the group and the responsibility of the individual. And I actually think both then and now, we are responsible for both. So bear with me as I kind of go through this. So this tribe, obviously there's thousands of them, right? There's in the neighborhood of like 60,000 of each of these tribes. Again, men alone, but more than that, including the women. Moses is making them walking away responsible to discourage the rest of the people, right? So they're saying, if you guys leave, right, how can the rest of us be encouraged to go to war against the people that are living there? Because if you guys remember 40 years ago, when all those single tribe leaders went in, they were like, oh, whoa, there's a lot of big people in there and it's really scary and the cities are fortified and we just don't think we're going to win, right? And that's why, and Moses reminds them, that's actually why this generation died out in the wilderness, because they didn't trust God. And so Moses is starting to see some of that in these people. And so there's a recognition that as a group, God has put them together as a group. They are a people group, right? Now, every single person in that people group is responsible for themselves, for the faith that they have, for their own walk with the Lord. But it seems also like every person in that tribe is also responsible for the entire tribe. Now, I'm going to say like the leaders have more responsibility, right? Because there's something to be said that when and we can see it in our real lives, when a leader crashes and burns, it really is disheartening for the rest of us. We have had a lot, unfortunately, more than I'd like to say, Christian, strong, effective, right? Christian leaders fall into some kind of wild and crazy sin. And some of them have passed away, or some of them have just been removed from the pulpit, or some of them have stayed in the pulpit and they're still, even though they've fallen into sexual sin, and even though, or some other kind of sin, it's not just sexual sin, but some other kind of sin. And even though they have been sort of denounced by other people and recognize that there's sin there, they're still staying there. And it's disheartening to a lot of people, right? And we have all this internet access now, and so we can hear what they've said and we can hear the way that they behave. And it's disheartening to the rest of us, right? So And it's disheartening to those who are outside of the faith who look in and they say, oh, these people say that they follow the Lord and look at all that they've done. I never did that, right? I never, um, it's usually some kind of affair or whatever it might be. I never did that. And so look at these leaders that are doing that. It's really disheartening. We are responsible for, in some ways, and not that we have to tell them what to do, but by our own life and behavior and the way that we as a community intermingle with each other, right? It's really important that we are both faithful in our own hearts and then uplifting in our tribe, which again, our tribe right now is people who follow Jesus. So I think we consistently have multiple responsibilities to follow the Lord when we say we're following the Lord. That being said, here we go with these people, and Moses is mad. However, these people are like, hey, listen, we will go to war with you. We will take up our arms. We will follow you into battle. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that our women and our children and our animals, right, our livestock, our herds, our flocks, those kinds of things, they are all safe and in this community. So I want you to allow us to build this community up and for us to be able to live here after. So they're all going to live there, right? The women, the children, the flocks, they're all going to live there while the men go and take the land with the rest of the tribes. So they are not giving up on the tribe of Israel. They are not what maybe we would think of as chickening out. They are going to be completely and fully invested in that as well. They're just building up. They just like this area and they just want to stay and build a community in this area. So I want to go to verse 22. So verse 22 is where, let's go to 20. Moses says to them, if you will do this, if, and I love these if thens because I do think that they're really important. I sometimes think that we give a false message that there are no requirements to follow Jesus. I think that there are requirements to follow Jesus, and here there are requirements to follow God. And I always say that because this whole thing is connected, right? So if those of you are like, well, what does this have to do with Jesus? It has everything to do with Jesus, right? We're building this deep foundation of what it looked like for the Israelites, and then why, when Jesus came, that mattered, right? So it has everything to do with Jesus. So if you will do this, if you will arm yourselves before the Lord for battle, and if all of you who are armed cross over the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven his enemies out before him, then when the land is subdued before the Lord, you may return and be free from your obligation to the Lord and to Israel, and this land will be your possession before the Lord. So Moses has agreed to give them that land. If they do this, then they will be free, right? Their obligation is complete. They have gotten everybody into the land of Canaan, and then they will get this land. So he agrees to it then. Then it says in verse 23, but if you fail to do this, you will be sinning against the Lord, and you may be sure that your sin will be found. Sorry, says, and you may be sure that your sin will find you out. I just like the wording of that. I found it to be quite interesting. So your sin is going to find you out. You are not going to run from it. So if you do not do this, and if you make this vow and you do not follow through in it, your sin will find you out. Again, it seems like a statement that seems to be true for all eternity. So, and then I want to just go to verse 33, which tells you who's going in. And this is coming close to the end of this chapter. Verse 33, it says, Moses gave to the Gadites, the Reubenites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh was the son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, the whole land with its cities and the territory around them. So it's that half-tribe of Manasseh, one of his sons in that tribe. And so those were the sort of 2.5 tribes that will eventually live and take over that land. So moving on to the next chapter, which there's a lot in this chapter, but there's not really a lot to talk about because what he's doing is he's following the route that and I think this is fascinating for anyone who like sort of wants to know what it looked like what they did, how they did it, where they went. I think it's really fascinating for anyone who is interested in that geographically. So you can look at it and you can go, this is the map and this is exactly where they went. So I'm going to quickly show you a picture on here. I'm going to try and post a link of the path that Moses and the Israelites took because it's interesting. But essentially, they come from this top corner in Egypt, and then they cross over the Red Sea, of course, and then they come all the way down that little, it's terrible, that's terrible, this little triangle right in between Egypt and the land of Canaan. So it's sort of like that little V when you look at a map of Africa. They come down there. At the base of that is Mount Sinai, and that is where they camped for a while. God went up and he spoke to the Lord up in the mountains, and then they moved on from there. And you see it go around. So I'm going to really quickly show you. This is from a study Bible that I have, and so it's a really just very basic map. And then there are some other really good ones that I'm going to try and show. Here's it. Yeah. Okay. So this is the map, and this basically shows their route. So you can see their route. And remember, it took them 40 years. It took them a little bit more than that because remember they went from their in Gershon where they were in Africa, and they moved all the way over into towards the land of Canaan, and they did that in a really short period of time. And then they wouldn't listen, and then they had to wander for 40 years. So it was something like 42, 43 years, something in that neighborhood. And so it took them all that time, and they wandered around, down and around, and then eventually they're landing in the edge of Israel, and so they're getting ready to come into Israel. So I just want to read just a couple of verses. I know I have verse 50 that I wanted to highlight. It says, on the plains of Moab, by the Jordan, across from the Jericho, the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into Canaan, drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you. They're going to go in and they're going to kind of destroy everything. So they are going to overtake this land and it will be theirs. It is a promise that God made to Abraham many generations ago. God said, this is going to be the land. And interestingly enough, I'm in Acts in a different thing, in a Bible study that I'm in. And I'm in the book of Acts, and it's where Stephen sort of recounts everything that happens. This land is not Abraham's land. Abraham is a foreigner in this land. But God says, because Abraham follows him, God makes a covenant with him. And God says to him, I'm going to give you this land. So this is a gift that God is going to give to the people that he chooses. So again, when we look at God as if he's unfair, and I want to say this as if I'm understanding that I look at these things and I go, how is that right? Right? Like they were already there. They were on the land. They owned the land. They built up the land. They built the cities. They built the walls. How is it fair that God is going to take these Israelite people and he's going to bring them in this land, and the Israelites are going to take over this land? And that is a hard pill to swallow. So I'm not going to say this as if it's easy or as if I'm comfortable with it, because I have to tell you, it sits a little uncomfortable. All things being perfect, we should all be able to have our own little areas, right? Like why wouldn't God have put them in a different land? Why wouldn't he write something that wasn't already inhabited? That's not what he did. So I can question it all day, and there are times where I do, but there is just a reality that this is the land that God has promised to the people that follow him, and so he fulfills his promise. And so he is going to, like I said, he's going to take these people. He's going to go in. They're going to take possession of the land and settle in it, for God has given them the land to possess. Once they are in it, they are going to distribute it by lot. So remember that Urim that we were talking about a couple of days ago. So by lot, they're going to choose for each tribe or each son and each tribe of Jacob, they're going to get a piece of land. Now, obviously, we see at this point that 2.5 tribes are already out of that because they're on the outside of Israel and they are living somewhere else, but the rest of the tribes are still in, and they will get the land by lot. So if I go to verse 55, here's our big but again. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land. So their job is to go in and drive out the inhabitants of the land by God's wishes. If they do not, those you allow to remain will become barbs in your eyes and thorns in your side. They will give you trouble in the land where you live, and then I will do to you what I plan to do to them. So right now, what he plans to do to them is to allow the Israels to live there. He's going to take them over. They are not a people that follow God, right? They are not the chosen people of God. And so he's going to take them over and destroy them. Again, I even have some trouble saying it. But if the Israelites do not follow and do not do as God wishes, then God will destroy the Israelites instead. And so that is a big beware moment. Who do you follow, yourself or God? And so that is what they're being left with at this time. And tomorrow we're going to get a little bit more information, find out some more in the book of Numbers. That is it for today. So if you like this, if this was a blessing to you, if it helped you in any way, I want you to like it, share it, subscribe it, leave me comments. I love reading some of your comments, and I love hearing what you read in there, because some of you guys have left me stuff that I just didn't see. And so it's exciting to read some of your thoughts as well, or even some questions that you might have. I want to answer anything that's possible to answer. So like it, subscribe to the channel, share it with as many people as possible, read with other people. It makes the reading go by so much easier, and it makes it actually a lot more interesting. So I will see you next time. Keep reading.